Welcome to another episode of Film and Impact, where we connect with indie filmmakers from around the world who are using documentary to move the needle. I'm your host, Zephyr Roye, and today I am so happy to be welcoming our next guest. He's a really good friend and an amazing filmmaker, a writer, director, and producer from Kenya. His first feature documentary, Softie, premiered at Sundance earlier this year and won the Special Jury Award for editing. It was also the opening film at Hot Docs, and it just recently took Best Documentary at the Durban International Film Festival. So today we're gonna be talking about the unexpected journey of making this award-winning documentary. We'll also be talking about the renaissance of documentary in East Africa, filming and making a film in a politically tense climate, and censorship also when in film distribution. And we'll also be talking about making connections and how collaborations enriching the experience of making a film and telling a story. And you're gonna want to listen all the way to the end because he keeps it real. So let's welcome Sam Soko to Film and Impact. Soko, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to be talking with you. It has been a long time.
Yeah, it's super exciting. It's been a while, yeah?
Yeah, so we actually met in 2018 at IDFA, and I remember your journey was already such an exciting one, with a lot of unexpected twists and turns. And you tell us a little bit about that.
Cold, rainy Amsterdam.
Yeah,
It's
and
been it's been an incredible journey, and with so many I don't know. I'm just excited that we're at this point and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
well, thank you so much for joining me. This is one conversation that thought to myself, I have to speak with Soko, and I'm so excited to just hear how this journey has been from since we met in 2018, and everything that's happened after that. I remember that when you were making your film and we met, there was so much that you couldn't actually say about the film, because you're working on very sensitive, you know, topics. And from since then, it's been sort of a crazy ride. So, let's start maybe in the beginning and tell me a little bit about how you got to filmmaking, and then how you got to making this film particularly, and why.
Hey, that's first. I'm really happy that we're getting to chat. It's amazing. I love telling my friends that I actually know someone from Martinique. I know people from Martinique, and it's such a cool thing to say. So it's a privilege to talk to you, and it just tells you how amazing film is, and how film just brings people together.
Mm-hmm.
And my journey into film actually began in theater. So I accidentally chose. When I went to university, so I went to university to study information systems, and then I kind of realized very quickly it's something that I'd be okay at, but really wouldn't be excited with. And there was this course that was there called Creative Arts, Theatre and Film, and I'd never engaged in anything in that space cause unless it was the things you're in school and you kind of have to do when you're going through high school or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, how about I just try this? That's how I got into film. I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
let's see how this this goes. And I went to one class and I really loved it, and just kept going. And I ended up in a theater first, and I really loved storytelling, and just the idea of developing narratives and finding heart in stories, finding emotional arcs in stories. So that really excited me, and I went to this place. It was like at the time it was one of the 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 only repertory theaters in Kenya. It was called Phoenix Theaters, same place where Lupita started, and wanted to, like, find a space where I could just engage in a lot of storytelling and story development. And soon enough, I ended up working working to develop stories for documentaries for some people, and I liked it. And that's how. But that's now how long? Almost 10 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So since then, you've been making documentaries, and you made, or when did you start making this film that I've been talking about? The film is called Softie,
Softie.
and I know you've been making it for several years, like you've been working on it
Yeah.
for several years.
Yeah. It's been a while. So, like, at the point in which so me and a couple of friends of mine came together and started this company. At the time we called it Lightbox, but we changed the name to LBx Africa, and we wanted to kind of redefine storytelling from an African perspective. So we, from the get go, we wanted to be, use our abilities in storytelling to kind of bring what we go through or what we see every day to the world. Now, in, I think it was late 2012, early 2013, we had this idea of making an activist manual. So, looking for something, because at the time Kenya was going through this thing. So we just had a new constitution, and before then, historically, there was a lot of um, the opportunity to speak up in Kenya wasn't that big or that great. And a couple of years prior, in 2007, we had one of the worst um, ethnic violent clashes due to um, due to an election process. So we were kind of in a healing mode of figuring out how to use our civil liberties or engage in civil liberty and that sort of thing. So people had started doing a couple of protests, and police were trying to figure out what to do. And us guys are like, hey, how about we make a short video or short videos that activists can use to speak out. If you're in your space, you want to do a protest, these are the do's and don'ts. Or, this is how you prepare, this is how you mobilize, that sort of thing. And around the same time, there's this guy who was so larger than life and had been putting together some incredible protests, and his name was Boniface Mwangi. So we happened to be in the same space as Boniface, and we were like, hey, this is what we want to do. Is it something you would love to be a part of? And he was like, hey, cool. In fact, I'm going to a protest right now. How about you come? And I was like, no. But that's how I met him, and that's how the journey of Softie started in 2013. So it was just filming a few protests from, like, the beginning to end. Um, so
But just, I don't mean to cut you.
yeah, it's okay.
You didn't want to go to the protest because they were violent. The protests.
Yeah, like, it's one of those things that I think. it's interesting how the world right now, like when you see the protests that are happening in the US, and then people are complaining, oh, the police are being too aggressive and that sort of thing. And coming from a Kenyan perspective, that's the go-to operation. Like when you're going to the streets, you know the police are going to be violent. It's not there's the day they're not violent, all of you guys are just like, this is different. Because you're ready for them to be violent. Now, when someone tells you they're going to a protest, it's you have to soul search. Like, is this some place I wanted to go? And then it's probably gonna be in the news, and you're gonna be like, what would my parents think when they see me at a protest? So there's a whole societal what do you call it? There's how society views discrimination that exists to activists and protesters. And I think for me, that's what made me realize that this is a story worth telling. Because I was like, isn't it interesting how we've gained so much from activists, but yet they're still one of the most um, people really talk down to activists. People really do not see activists as human beings. They see activism as something reckless, something you do when you're young and you don't know any other thing to do. And yet, we've gained so much as humanity from activism. So that kind of sprouted the seed. That thinking and that thought is what sprouted the seed of like, we should make a film that kind of redefines and speaks to activism in a very human way. And that's how the journey started.
And that is very visible in the film, because you follow Softie Boniface for several years, and you're really in his family life, in his intimate spaces, and we see how his family is shaken by his commitment to his country, to the cause, how his children are affected, how his wife is affected. Um, I don't want to say too much about the film, but we see that he's at one point he's separated from his family.
Family.
Um, it's I how does this how did this affect you also as a director and as part of somebody who's following this person for years and who's created a relationship with them also?
Over the time, it's
Yeah.
so at the beginning, when like we started making the film, it was such we were just young guys full of adrenaline and thinking we just want to redefine the word activist. And because people always, whenever I would say tell someone, I'm like, oh no, we're filming this activist, it's such it felt like you're telling someone, saying the word activist is such a derogatory term. And the point when you follow Boniface home, for example, you realize he's a father, and the kids have no idea that you're an activist. The kids demand of you what they would demand of their father. So, and one there's like this one moment when we were filming, and then he was all serious and talking about a protest, and he was just so engulfed. And his son, that time I think his son was 2 or 3 years old, and the son was like, hey, I need you to help me open this bottle. It's like, you're like, at that point, and for a second you realize this guy has to be a father, and also has to do all these other things, which as a society we have allowed, like we've allowed an environment of impunity, corruption, and bad governance to be so big that he can't just be a father. And I think for me, that was such a very poignant moment. Like, to be, wait, this is not right, you know, because there is also a notion and illusion, and of course there are activists who do things, who are like, who monetize their work, but I saw someone who who's clearly struggling with money, but he was like, we have to do this. This is something we have to do. And you're like, why? And in that process of understanding the why and seeing the toll that it takes on his children and his wife, you have to take a step back. You have to be like, whoa, this is not right. Like, we can't continue being like this. And I think that just kind of enforced the need to to kind of tell a story that seeks to be a reflective, you know, and have others have the same sense that I did when I was looking at them.
Yeah. And since then, you've tell me a little bit about the journey from there to now, because I remember when we met in 2018, there are certain things that you hadn't expected to happen, responses that you got to the film when it was first pitched. You didn't it wasn't like you wrote this film, like you wrote the story and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna pitch this and I'm gonna get funded, etc. You didn't have this thing all planned out, you know. So there are things that were quite unexpected that happened from the beginning when you first pitched the film. I don't think you even had the idea to pitch the film, if I remember well.
Actually, here's the thing. So, like you said in the beginning, this is supposed to be like 5 minute videos.
Right.
So, and this is 2013. So by the time I was like at around end of 2014, I knew I was done. I was like, I have footage of several protests. We can cut this together, put it on Facebook or YouTube, and we're good. We move on to other things. And then at the time when I remember going to this that was the first time I think when Boniface started getting threats to his life and the work that he was doing, and I was like, it's not worth it. Let me just film a little bit, a little bit more, so that I can just show that that threats are a big deal in an activist's life, and how because at that point he started contemplating, should he stop being an activist, because it's not worth losing your life essentially in especially if you have a family. So we were like, okay, now when we were at that point and filmed a little bit of the threats and everything that was going on, again, I knew I was done. But this time I was like, maybe I don't have to do a 5 minute video, I can do a 25-minute video. I have enough footage to do a 25-minute video for sure. And I can probably take this to one of the broadcasters who have a 25-minute segment, and it will be great. And the story will still be told. They'll still see about what protesting is all about, and we're good. Ha! Lies. So there's this moment in the film where Boniface announces that he wants to run for office. So
Right.
we're standing there with his wife, Jerry, and we learn about it together. And I'm like, wait, what? This is something. I'm like,
I had the exact same reaction when I looked at the film. I was like, wait, did he say like, so I'm like, no, let me go back. Let me like go back because did he say he's going to what did he say he's going to do? Did he say he's going to run? Yeah, I had that exact same reaction. Like, wait a
and
while.
now we were standing there, and the whole time we'd be like, it's recording, it's recording. But I think at that moment, I remember I had to, and before then, what happened was his wife was protecting the family from the outside world. So she was very skeptical about anyone filming them and what's happening. So, but I remember that time when that happened, I was talking to her, I was like, hey, would you mind doing like a short interview, just like 10-15 minutes, and tell me, how you feel about this whole process and what's going on. We spoke for 4 hours, and it was it clicked that this is not a film that is just about this person and what he's doing and about activism. This is a film about love, very complex love. This is a film about love for country and love for family and why we have to make those choices. And when that happened, I had no money, like none. I was actually in debt because remember, I wanted to do a 25-minute video and I just put it out. And I had no knowledge of how documentaries work in the outside world. All my information with documentaries is from what I watched, from the few pieces. And then there's a friend of mine who who kind of had got some funding in his film, and every time he would travel or go to a workshop or anything like that, he'd bring me a DVD. Because I remember he brought me a DVD of Five Broken Cameras, and I remember watching the film, and I was like, "Ooh, this is a whole genre that exists that gets support, and you can make a film that's a feature film. You can make something that's interesting and cool." And at the time, I started looking for other documentaries that we could get inspiration from or speak to. Because before that, you'd see a really good documentary. Like there's actually a very funny story about one of them. But say you'd see a film like Nostalgia from the Light, and it'll seem like you will never in your life be able to make a film like that. Like it's so good. You put yourself, you're like, this is too far for me.
Yeah.
So let me this film that is I want to make is too big for me. You start telling yourself that. You're like, this film, wow. And you start questioning yourself. So when that happened, I remember I reached out to one of my friends, and I was like, what the friend who was bringing me the DVD, his name is Pete. He's he's like my brother in film in such a huge way. So Pete was like, "Oh, yeah, that has to be a feature film."
There you go. That's how it happened.
Yeah, and that was like it was a very hard decision to make because I was already in at that time I was in already for like almost 3 years, and I was like, I can do the many things I want to do in my life. Now, there's so many other, like I don't want to be held down by just making one film. But here I was in this situation where, and I had, the thing is, I had seen his family grow. Like the kids had, were growing up, and we kind of had started having like a very strong bond. And I was like, wow, this is something I have to do. And it was such a difficult decision to make, but eventually I just came to accept. So in 2016 is when I think it sunk in that this is a feature film. And at that point, that's when now I was like, okay, I need to start looking for money.
And then how did you move from like that from that point on? What happens? Like at that
What
moment
happened
when you
was,
decide like I need money.
what happened was, so now I did have an honest conversation with the crew I was working with and the other filmmakers I was working with, and I was like, hey, this is the journey that I've chosen to take, and I'd love to take it with you. And it's gonna take a lot, and we're not. we don't have the money to pay people and stuff, but um, we'll put in the work. We'll do our best and try to get us over the line, basically. So what was happening around the same time? My friend Pete was also directing his first feature film as well, called I Am Samuel, which premiered at Hot Docs this year as well. So when Pete was when he was bringing up Samuel, he had been chosen to be part of Good Pitch Nairobi, which is an event organized by Doc Society and DocuBox in Kenya. So he had to do like a demo, and so I kind of helped them edit the demo. So when I was editing the demo, he was like, "Hey, how about you come for this Good Pitch thing?" And just because I wanted to go, like, yeah, and then he was like, "Hey, you come, you might meet some cool people, and you might, show them the demo you have." Because I remember at that time I was still questioning whether I want to make the feature or I want to do the short. Because after the little research I'd done was showed how daunting fundraising is and how complicated it is. So I was like, do I really want to get myself into this thing? And it might be too complicated. And so when I attended Good Pitch, again, I was just impressed by the quality of the presentations and the level of knowledge that people had of the process and everything that needs to happen. So at the end, I remember I was going home and I'd cut a short demo of Softie, of like what I'd had so far. Now, it was a very different demo from the last pitch I did, but it was essentially just introducing who Boniface was and the magnitude of what we had been doing in the last that time, like 3 years. So I actually remember I was walking. I was looking for Pete to say, thank you so much for inviting me. This was so cool, but I'm going home now. Like, this has been great, because you know maybe one day I'll get to meet some of these guys, and we can talk about projects and stuff. So when I got there, Pete was standing right next to Jess Search, and Just Search, and Just is one of the co-founders of Doc Society. So Pete was like, "Hey, you should totally meet this guy because he has a much better film than mine." And so Jess was like, "Hi, what's your film about?" And guess what? Everything disappeared.
Like you couldn't remember?
I couldn't remember anything. I could barely talk. Like, so I was like, "What's your film about?" I was like, "Oh,
Blank.
that." So my film is about activism, following an activist. And then, so the thing that, again, God bless Pete. So Pete started. So we were like two rappers, and he was my hype man. So I was saying, so my film is about activism, and then he's like, yes, he's following this activist who's doing this and this and this and this, and then I'm like, now in Kenya, then he's like, now the guy is actually this guy. He's called Boniface. You should follow him. Actually, just Google him. You'll see what he's done. And then, so just asking, so what are you following and everything? So like, he's running for office, and then so Peter's like, yeah, now because he's running for, and then so I think just kind of was like, okay, this is not making sense. Do you
You
do
have a
you have? She was like, do you have anything like I could see, or do you? No, no. What did she say? She said maybe you can send me something, or like do a write up or anything. Then I'll be like, great, great, I'll do that. I was like, in fact, I do have something on my phone that maybe you could watch. And she was like, okay, let me see it. So the video is like around 3 4 minutes, and we had so I gave her my phone, gave her like headphones, and then she started watching. And in the middle, she paused it. And then she was like, don't move from this spot. I need to get someone. So she runs off and goes to get her partner BD, and BD comes back, and they start watching it from the beginning. And then they started asking me all these questions, like, "How long have you been filming this thing?" And then I was like 3 years. And then, what? This is like, it was so. That was the first time, I think. There's the second time, because the first time that I met this, the lady at the time, who's again such a wonderful lady called Kara Mattis. She was the head of Just Films at Ford. So when we were doing the manual, and we were talking about, so we met her once, and then again in a lot of gibberish, I tried to explain what I was doing as a manual about activism, and it was kind of very confusing. But she gave us some money to do that, and that was the first funding we received. But this was like 2 years before that. So when I met Jess, this was the first people I was meeting who were talking about the film as a feature film. And so they were like, okay, this is what you do. We want you to do like a write up and a budget and a treatment and all those things that you have to do to apply for funding, which I did not have. And I was like, and then they were like, send them through. So because I did not have them, and then because, I was like, maybe my film is not that big, because, during the day I'd seen the films at Good Pitch. So I was like, maybe they believe it, but, I don't want to disappoint them. So they told me to do all that, but I didn't do it.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And this is what happened. So 2 weeks later,
Oh, shit.
they started looking for Pete, because they were like, Pete, who was that filmmaker you introduced us to?
We still haven't heard back from him.
We still haven't heard back from him. So Pete, who was in a whole other country, started looking for me, and he's like, dude, did you ever get back to Justin Beatty? And I'm like, no, but me, I thought, you guys had such
Yeah,
good
they
films.
forgot
I
about
didn't think
you.
I stand a chance. Yeah. He's like, dude, what do you mean? They told you to write. I'm like, oh, okay. So he
Like they were
texted me their
serious.
email. Yes, they texted me their email. So we started emailing. And I had like 3 days to put together a budget, logline treatment, and synopsis. And I think the rest is history from that point.
Okay. Oh my God. So, well, from that point, because this year, Softie, the film, was premiered at Sundance and
Right.
actually won a special jury award. So that, yeah, that's pretty big history. Send me a treatment
Right.
and like
Yes.
not following up to Sundance. There's like a little gap there.
There's,
Yeah.
and it's so incredible how, like, from I think from that point I managed to go. I went for my first like film festival, which was IDFA in 2017.
Yeah.
No, at the end of 2016, I went to the first my first like that's the first time I went for IDFA and went to any film festival. And again, if you've never been to a film festival, it's such an experience.
It
It's an
is.
extreme experience, and
It is.
IDFA is like the biggest of one of the biggest of that kind of experience. So I was absolutely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think I picked from it that was really amazing was I started meeting other filmmakers who were feeling exactly like me.
Yeah.
And they had the same insecurities and they had the same questions. And I think at that point I started believing that what I'm doing could mean something, because we kind of started feeding off each other in terms of, like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I've been doing. I've been doing this. And when you meet another filmmaker who's telling you they've been filming something for 10 years, you're like, hey, Now, I'm really not alone. I've just been there for 3. You've been there for 10. Wow.
Yeah.
And then you meet other filmmakers who are like, they're just premiering their first films. And and at the same time, I think I started connecting with other fans and other places. So it's through that info that I met um, a lady, an amazing lady called Heidi from Hot Dogs, and we applied it for Hot Dogs, and then we got into Hot Dogs, and I think through Hot Dogs, there's so many connections that were made that so we ended up finding one of our like one of our main production partners, I Steal Film, through
Mhm.
Hot Dogs. And now the story I was gonna say that was very funny was one of the films that kind of really inspired me and I kind of held very dearly with me was this film called Last Train Home. Now, I did not know Last Train Home was done by I Steal Film. Like, because it's a film I watched and really loved at the point I was doing research and watching films, and I was very, like, it's such a beautiful film. So when we at Hot Docs and one of our mentors was like called one of our mentors who later became an executive producer and co-editor with the film, co-editor of the film. So Mila Ongping. So Mila was one of the mentors at Hot Docs. So Mila is like, hey, hi, I'm Mila. I'm from I Still Filmed. And I'm like, hey, cool, cool, cool. I still film. And then with I'm also a producer of Last Train Home. And I'm like, what? Are you like? So I remember after he did that, I went back to him like, dude, you worked on Last Train Home, and he's like, yeah, 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 yeah. Like, oh my god, and then we started talking, and I think through the year, because the way the mentorship at Hot Dogs works is like a yearly mentorship, it's like a whole year mentorship. So through the year, and 2017 for me was like a big, because that's the election year for the film. That's the year Boniface was actually taking part in the election. So when that was happening, um, at the same time, I was trying to figure out how to fundraise money. But the beauty is, once I got money from Doc Society, I was able to pay all the debts I had accrued up to that point. Like it was a joy.
I can imagine.
It was incredible. So the next level was getting the right people to help in developing and thinking about the story. And the mentorship at Hot Docs and me meeting Mila on Twing really took that to a whole other level because I started sending material because a really big advantage I think if you are a documentary filmmaker and you can edit, it's a huge advantage because because since I could edit, I started putting together scenes, and I started sending scenes. I was like, "What do you think about this? This is something I'm stuck in. I don't know how to deal with this. How can I showcase this?" Um, and then this is what I filmed, and this is how I'm thinking of putting it together. Does it work? Is it? And once we started having that conversation, and I think because Mila's first apprehension from the film was again basing on the beginning because of how we started, we didn't have like a heavy the family connection again was not that strong, and a big reason for this, and I think it's something important that we should talk about as filmmakers is when you're going through a process of developing your film, you do engage with very many people who give you a lot of different advice, and it at the point when I was like I wanted the family to be a part of the film, but the material I had didn't really wasn't that strong to do that, and because originally I wasn't, because originally I was looking for something else. So at the point when I'm editing whatever I'm editing, I'm realizing there are things I have and there are things I don't have. So you start looking at that. So when you're putting that together and you're talking to people, so you have people who are like, no, 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 don't change this. This is an activist film. Keep it an activist film. So you start pitching it as an activist film. And all of a sudden, people are like, no, 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 we don't like it as an activist film. What else do you have? And you're like, what do you mean? So you kind of become inundated with a lot of this advice that kind of confuses you. And you're like, so when I was speaking with Milan, like, what kind of film do you want to make? And we were having, and he was like, in the footage that was presented at the time speaks to an activist film. And but I'm like, do you want to make an activist film? I'm like, no, I don't want to make an activist film. The film I wanted to make was a film about families, a film about love. And I'm like, so do you have the footage to prove that? I'm like, I think I do. I just need to sit with it and put it together. So when I started putting together footage that had a lot more of the family and had a lot more of that family connection, that's when it was like, whoa, this thing clicks. This thing, there's something there. And I think from us engaging and having that kind of conversation on that level, we eventually, it developed from a mentorship mentee relationship to like, collaborate, like co-collaborators. And we eventually edited the film with I Still Film with another gentleman called Ryan Mullins. And it became this very beautiful synergy that kind of accepted and appreciated the initial vision that I had of making this film about love.
So there are two questions I want to ask you. Um, so the film, it's about family and love, and we also see the life of Boniface, who is an activist and who makes those hard choices that he has to make because he feels that he has to do this for his country, and in doing it for his country, he's doing it for his family. Um, what is the how did the film, like, what was the reception like when the film came out? How was it received in Kenya? It won an award at Sundance. Did it get positive, um, positive welcome from
So
you?
the film as yet hasn't premiered in Kenya. We're hoping it's gonna premiere at some point in the next few months. And but um I think us getting into Sundance, like, because the film, so Softie is the first Kenyan directed and produced film to get into Sundance. And
That's amazing.
like I said at the
History again.
we never thought of that. Like, that was, I think, if the film would have ended up in a festival somewhere and was premiering, that was something we would have been very happy with, because it was such a labor of love that we were like, we just wanted to share this film with the Kenyan audience, which is sad we haven't, but that was the core audience that we wanted to speak to. So when we got into Sundance, it was such a whirlwind. But I think the most tense screening that I had of the film was the first time I showed the film to Boniface and Jerry. That was scary.
Why was it scary?
So, all these years you've been following them, all these years you've been filming, they've not seen anything. And then we finished most of the principal filming at the end of 2017, early 2018, and it took us almost 2 years editing the film. So, but by the time when you are at the end of 2019, when because they learned we got into Sundance and they hadn't watched the film, so that just raised the curiosity times 1,000.
Yeah.
And but I promised them, I was like, we're gonna watch the film before it premieres at Sundance, like before the actual premiere date, and we wanted to take them to Sundance as well, like them, the both of them and their family as well. So we got this private cinema, and then they came. They were both very tense because they were very unsure of what they were gonna watch. So they were sitting at the front, right in front of the screen, and I was sitting at the back, just kind of squeezing, trying to, so that I was actually looking at them the whole time. I wasn't watching the film, which is which
You look like looking at their reaction, like every scene.
looking at. I was like, can you imagine sitting through a 90-minute film
Yeah,
while the whole time you're just on the audience?
at on the edge of your seat.
And then, yeah,
What are they thinking? What are they thinking?
you're waiting. Exactly, you're waiting for the moment for when they're gonna stand up and start, chasing you out.
Yeah.
So, but it was interesting that as they were watching the film, they were moving through the emotions of their life. Like at the moment, they were holding hands, they were all, very together, and then at some moment they're like, don't touch me. At some moment it became very emotional. They were crying, and then they came back. Then came back together. Then at the end of the film, there was this incredible silence, and I was like, okay, just give it to me straight. Don't hide anything. And then they just came and hugged me, both of them, at the same time, and they were like, thank you for telling the truth. And that's what I promised them. I At the beginning, when we started, I was like, I want to tell the truth. I don't want, and it'll be in some, I know there are points will be painful, I know there are points that will be happy, but it's going to be the truth. If you're okay with that, allow me to make the film. And they allowed me to make the film, because they allowed me to be with their kids and be part of their kids' lives. And I am very close with their children. And so when they watched the film and they were like, thank you for telling the truth, I was like, whoa. I felt there's a sudden calm that just descends.
Yeah.
And then, so after that happened, the next stride is now the premiere at Sundance. So audiences have paid money to watch your film. You're scared they might, decide to walk out at some point. And once you saw that the theater was sold out, you're like, whoa, this is too much pressure. And the whole family was there, and that was the first time the kids were watching the film for the first time, and they relived their life. Like you could see who were like, look at that one, that sort of thing, and they saw the trajectory of their life. But then at the end, we had the audiences standing up and clapping for the families and clapping for the filmmakers, and that was incredible. Like it was such an amazing experience. And since then, we've been to a couple of festivals, and Corona just, shifted the dynamic of life. But we've been to a couple of festivals. We were the opening night film at Hot Docs, which is like a coming home for us and the film. And like I said, we are gonna be in. We've been to the Hot Docs. We've been to CPH Docs. We've been to Full Frame. Um, we are gonna be the opening, not the opening. We're gonna be one of the films at the Encounters Festival in South Africa and Durban, and we are hoping to come home in a few months. But we also had our UK premiere on Storyville on BBC, and the UK has one of the largest Kenyan diaspora, and a lot of people were texting their family here, being like, "Whoa, you got to watch this film. You have to watch this film." And the the Kenyans who've watched the film not in Kenya have had an incredible experience with the film, and we can't wait for the Kenyans in Kenya to share the same experience.
And when we spoke last week, you were telling me that there was some form of a bit of pressure because on the film in Kenya, because I think they gave it a rating that was adults only. So there's some efforts to either censor the film or to keep it from being seen by the general public.
So like I will talk about it, and if we have, I'm hoping that we're able to announce when the premiere would be,
Yeah.
because once the premiere is gonna once we announce when the premiere is gonna be in Kenya, then I would have already shared what the rating of the film is, because we haven't told people about the rating yet. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll talk about it, but then I'll let you know if if you can use it, because if you use it, if we haven't spoken about it, it's gonna be kind
Yeah.
of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happened is, for us to show the film in Kenya, we have to take it for classification. And when we took the film for classification, we got classification for adults only. And a part of me feels sad because, whenever someone tells you a film is adults only, you kind of have a certain kind of expectation. And then when you go into the film and you're asking yourself, why the hell did they say this film is adults only? And that's what makes me sad, because the audiences are going to probably come into the film thinking that there is something in this film that's, scandalous, or while there isn't, because everything in the film is true and it's what happened. And some of the information is even in the public domain. Like, it's not something that we sat down and made up. And we become very curious why something like that would happen. Like, why would a film expressing truth, because it's like giving news another rating, right? We never watch news and they're like, this news is rated R, sort of thing. We don't. That's not something we see, right? But the choice of that happening, kind of, for me, speaks to a kind of censorship, a kind of, stalling of, like, we don't trust the Kenyan audience, whom are very mature and watch things that, you're like, there's no way this is getting a rating of 13. But the films that get ratings of 13 that are super violent, super sexual, like, have very heavy content, but content that is about our truth and our people and our love is considered adult, that gets an adults only rating. So for me, that does make me sad. But like, I think when the people who would be able to watch the film, they would make up their own minds, and they would understand there's no reason whatsoever the film should have gotten that kind of rating.
Mm. Do you feel like the experience having been at Hot Dogs and Sundance, do you feel like it changed something for you, like through the journey and right now?
I think there's so many things that have happened through the journey of the film that have changed so much for me as a filmmaker, and for us as a team, that's Softie. Because, like, I started out in 2016. By 2016, end of 2017, I didn't have another producer. I was doing everything, like, and handling the creative work, and making sure it's good and it's working great, and at the same time, writing proposals and going for pitches. It's hard. It's a lot of work, and that kind of allowed me to network with other people. And one of the people I networked with, who's become an incredible partner in making the film, is Tony Kamau, who's my co-producer in the film. And she really carried a lot of weight in terms of just allowing me to continue to be creative and pursue a lot of the creative questions that we had, and put in the work that needed to be put in so that the film becomes what it is. And at the same time, I managed to meet incredible filmmakers in all these spaces. Um, Filmmakers that hopefully I'm gonna collaborate with in future. Some I'm working with or advising on right now with their work. Some we're talking about, just how the industry is and how things are going. I managed to learn about how the documentary world works, which was, it's such valuable information, which we have been very, uh, like, we have, it's not strategic, but we've taken a very conscious decision to engage and pass over that information that we've learned, like pass it on to other filmmakers and other people who want to tell stories at different stages and different phases of their work. And something really incredible that has happened with making of Softie is it's shown that some of these barriers can be broken, and some of these opportunities can be accessed by different filmmakers. And right now, there's like an incredible renaissance of documentaries happening in East Africa. Like, we have an incredible number of films that are either in the making or about to come out. Like this year, there are 3 Kenyan documentaries in the festival circuit, and that's last. And this is like 5 years ago. There wasn't even one.
Wow.
And there's a couple of more that are gonna come out. A couple of more that are being developed, and we're just our stories are becoming seen and known by the world. Like, nothing symbolizes that more than me sitting here in Nairobi, Kenya, chatting to you in Martinique.
Martinique.
I'm just saying. So it's been such a rich journey, and it's something I would like to pass on to other filmmakers so that they can experience it and they can keep making this art, because I believe that there's so many stories, there's so much story in the world for us to share, and we need to just keep breathing it in and sharing it with the world.
That is so amazing. Do you have you like already organized something where you are in Kenya with other filmmakers in Nairobi, or is this something that you would like to do, like a project that's
So
in the
we do have as filmmakers. So there are a couple of like collectives that are kind of coming up, or we do have this group called Film Therapy that brings together filmmakers, both Kenyan filmmakers, both in fiction and non-fiction, and we share experience. Like, when we got into Sundance, we had like a conversation with, like, okay, this has been our journey thus far. Then we went to Sundance and came back, and like, this is the experience at Sundance. So if you film, we're not going to be the only film that's going to get into Sundance. There's going to be another Kenyan film that's going to get into Sundance. So when they get into Sundance, this is the gig. And it's not just about Sundance, but it's about any festival you get into. And like, this is a path. This is what we felt we did right. This is what we felt we didn't do well. This is how you learn from it. And I've talked about the process and everything, which really helped. As LBx Africa, we kind of have taken the initiative to support a lot more films and produce a lot more films, because there is kind of a deficit of producers in Kenya, and in this case particularly documentary producers. So we decided to take up a couple of films from different filmmakers, from mid-lengths to feature films, and there's one of them called Nyandeng that just I think in June, became the first Kenyan film to win the Wickers Prize. Not Kenyan film, the first African film to win the Wickers Prize as part of the Sheffield Film Festival, and
Um,
it's by a first time female director telling an incredible film. Um, we have another film called What's Eating My Mind that's going to be in the Durban Film Mart pitching as well by a first time female director as well. So there's there's several other films that there's another film called Leia also that's going to be part of Good Pitch Nairobi, that's by a first time director as well. So there's several films that we're working on with a lot of first time directors, but all amazing, incredible documentaries. Not only happening in Kenya, there's a film happening in South Sudan, there's a film happening in Zimbabwe, but just trying to first encourage cross, like kind of Pan African co productions, kind of work within our own borders, which is again is something that's very rare. But trying to encourage it and build that, but also allow a lot more voices to come out to the world.
yeah, I think it's pretty incredible that you've gone from your experience of, back when you first pitched at Good Pitch, and feeling of comparing yourself to, or comparing your films to the other films that you were seeing and thinking, not good enough, they're not really interested. Even when people said, we're definitely interested, give us something. And realizing and understanding as you did the journey, like, you know, this is possible. It's not out of our reach. Our stories can be seen internationally,
Yeah.
and people are interested in seeing them also. Um, just taking everything from that journey and like bringing it back and telling other like emerging first time directors, filmmakers, producers, like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I've walked this road. Let me tell you.
You, yeah,
Like, let me tell you how to do it.
yeah, and they're walking their own journeys and they're having their own experiences, and we're trying to learn from each other because it's
Yeah,
the journey is not like one direction. There's many ways to get there, and I
definitely.
think for me getting there is to share your story with the audience that you want to share that story with, and I think something that I believe in, and particularly like with all, like the people of color and especially black people, I think we we have lost so much dignity in storytelling that I think it's time our storytellers try to bring dignity back, like try and tell our stories in a way that is honest and reflective of society as it is right now, so that young people can grow and learn from us. Because as documentary filmmakers, that's something we have to do. And we have that opportunity to do that. And the platforms are increasing. And maybe my contribution is Softie, but I would encourage other people to to use the opportunity to share their stories and not think that there is a particular story that is needed or wanted, and just keep keep sharing your stories, because that's what we need more than ever, and kind of inundate people with who we are, what we're about, and be proud of who we are. And that's such, it's so important, and we can't take that for granted.
I definitely agree. I think there's something very like that really hits me that you just said. It's about getting your story to the audience that you want to see your story. Understanding that when you tell your story or when you make a film, it doesn't have to go to a specific festival. Like, it doesn't absolutely have to be seen at a major festival. It doesn't absolutely have to go to a European country, or it does not absolutely have to be seen in North America, for example. It can be seen locally. You can actually make a film and say, this is for my community, this community, or this is for this just my country. Like, I need these people to see my film, and the success of the film is not measured by whether it has been to this festival or whether it has received an award or um, even those things are always wonderful. But what is most important is why were you making the film? Who did you want to see this film? What was the
Yeah.
impact that you wanted to have with this film?
Yeah.
And if, for example, with Softie, imagine like Softie hadn't gone to Sundance, but it had just been seen in Kenya, and there was
And generated an incredible reaction. That would have been
yes,
amazing. That
yes,
still would be
and
amazing.
people had a reaction, and they took action based on the film, or like some policy was changed because of that, or it
Yeah,
affected.
and there's so many, and there's so many films, and I know it feels kind of weird saying it, and our film premiered at Sundance, but there's the thing is, there's so many people out there who are willing to work and collaborate with you and ensure that that ambition dream comes true. And it's for me, it's I'm also a very firm believer in collaboration and finding synergies that work towards the goal that your storytelling is for. And because I think we there is need to speak truth to what the situations are and how everyone is, that working towards people getting fair treatment and in all the spaces that we're working in, and having all as many diverse voices being represented in all the spaces on earth. And for that to happen, I think we have to have honest collaborations, and I've benefited from that. I have I'm honestly grateful with the collaborations I've had, because they've really enriched our work. They've enriched the relationships that we've had. We've created amazing friendships out of those collaborations, but we also made an incredible film out of those collaborations. And if we use that and have that happen, then there's so much that can be told, and there's, it is possible to make a film that can speak to my audience but also speak to a global audience and a different kind of audience. In our case, the path we took is we had someone who understood a different kind of audience and myself edit the film together. So when they would put something, I'd be like, I think that's a bit too much. Or I'd put something, I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. And we work together to make sure that there's a balance and something clicks. And I think that's what's happening. Like, we have audiences from different places understanding a film that, you've never been to Kenya, but you watched the film and saw my reality, and you saw a family in Kenya, you saw that, and it spoke to you, and you understood what was going on. And that's all we would want. Like, we want the Kenyans to appreciate our films, but we also want the world to appreciate our films. We want the world to see our stories. So, and a really big reason for that to happen will be through collaboration. So that's something we'd really want as well.
I think that's a really good way for us to like close off this conversation, because I feel like
We can
when
keep going.
when I have a conversation with a filmmaker, we often, I think, we always come back to this point of collaboration, like the importance of collaboration, because we know how easy it is and how often filmmakers feel isolated, when they telling a story, when you are consumed with this need to tell a story, to put this truth out there, and you're all alone because sometimes you're in the beginning stages, and people don't understand where it is that you're going to the story, why it is that you want to tell the story. Maybe it's something that actually is disturbing to other people and they don't want you to tell the story. And oftentimes you have the question of your financial situation, like how am I going to support myself while I tell the story?
Exactly. Yeah.
If I'm not very familiar with, the system, how documentary, like this industry works, where do I get funding? How do I balance my like other work and making this film?
And making and you're not it's that thing for you're not the only one. Like the people
That's
who
the thing.
experience the same thing. Yeah.
Yes.
And we just need to keep sharing and keep talking to each other.
Definitely. That is where like collaboration becomes all important. Just
Yeah.
as you said, when you met other filmmakers, and that was also our experience, my experience and Stephanie's, when we met with other filmmakers and we had like this same experience at ITFA also. Like the first time we went to ITFA, we're like mind blowing. Like this
Yeah.
is like huge. Like you have thousands of people at the festival and so many filmmakers just with like the experiences and so many experiences. Like they come from all over the world and their
And
experience.
with so many documentaries. I'm saying there are like so many documentaries, so many stories. And
Yes.
oh,
And you understand that you are, without knowing it, like you're part of a community. And these
exactly.
people who are so open and they're so open to sharing and so open to collaborating. And you understand that you're not alone, Your story
It's true.
is yours and it always will be, but you're not alone in the thing that drives you to tell the story, and you're not alone necessarily in even the means that you have to tell the story. You actually have people with whom you can collaborate in
No,
telling,
that's
who might help you tell your story.
no, that's very true, and I 100% agree. So, that would be a cue for Martinique Kenyan collabo, right?
Yeah, LBx, LBx, TFF,
Yes.
LBx, and create some films. That would be pretty amazing.
You heard it here first.
Yep, there you go. So, Soko, hey man, I still have like so many questions to ask you, but like this would like we would go on talking for like for hours again. Um, thank you so much. Thank you so
No,
much for like sharing.
madly appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm huge fans of you guys. I'm following your work, fully supportive, and let's make the collaboration happen.
we're gonna make it happen, definitely.
Yeah.
Congratulations, like for Sundance, for Hot Dogs, for everything, for the
Thank
films
you.
that you're working on right now,
Thank
for the work that you're doing. Thank you for connecting and for staying connected with us. And I'm really excited for everything that's to come for you. And thank you for being with me today.
And thank you so much. And keep keep the fire burning.
Yes, man.